Hello and welcome to Security Panel brought to you by Celerity, the show that covers all the big topics in the world of cybersecurity. I'm your host, David Taylor, and on this week's episode of Security Panel, we're going to be looking at supply chains and the threats they pose to organizations. And to help me tackle this supply chain security episode, I'm going to be talking to Chris Ross from IBM Security. But first, let's take a look at some of the news stories that have been grabbing the cybersecurity headlines over the past few weeks. So first up in the news is that the Poly network had a vulnerability exploited by unknown actors that then led to the largest cyber heist in history. The China-based cross-chain decentralized finance platform had over $600 million worth of cryptocurrency stolen. But in a wild twist, the hackers actually returned $261 million worth of the cryptocurrencies. Why? Well, it could be due to a letter from the Poly network requesting that the money be sent back, or it could be the transparency that blockchain offers that makes it difficult for people to carry out these types of heists and get away with it. Elsewhere, a report from the Cabinet Office has highlighted that nearly half of the UK government's IT spend is on supporting all the legacy IT systems. How much, I hear you ask? Well, £2.3 billion was spent in 2019 keeping all the legacy systems alive. Whilst the costs seem astronomical, the report actually highlighted some other challenges and worries about cybersecurity. The report even quoted that some departmental services fail to even meet the minimum basic cybersecurity standards. Now that's not good, is it? But if anyone needs any help, come speak to Celerity about your digital transformation. And in other news, a global study of cybersecurity professionals by the ISSA and ESG has found that additional challenging workloads plus lack of investment is leading to a shortage of skills, which is also leading to burnout and unfulfilled cybersecurity jobs. The survey found that 57% believe that a cybersecurity skills shortage has had an impact on their organization, while just over 10% said it's had a significant impact. Furthermore, 62% said they've had increased workload, whilst 38% said they've had burnout from the extra work. Now let's get on with the show, starting with how supply chain attacks work. All right, Chris, I guess before we dive into supply chain security, it probably makes sense to, explain what it is and how it operates. So, just to kick us off, can you explain to the viewers, how does a supply chain attack operate?
Yeah, certainly. So a supply chain attack can also be called as a value chain or a third-party attack. It's generally where rather than attackers targeting a company head-on directly, they will target the so-called supply chain to that company. So the third-party services, the people that support that company to enable them to do their business, they will be the target with a view that the attackers can then pivot into that raw target organization. So the organization they really want to get to is the end game, but they can get to them by kind of maybe the weaker links that are connected to that organization. So it's rather than knocking on the castle door head on, it's going via the back door because there's a laundry person who comes around the back and is coming in and out every day delivering clean sheets.
Yeah,
That's the way you're going to get in rather than trying to batter down the big old front door.
brilliant. I mean, as if cybersecurity wasn't hard enough, we've now got to look at all these, extra surface and threat areas for the attackers to go for. So, um, is there any sort of significant supply chain attacks that sort of come to mind when we're talking about supply chain security?
Yeah, there's been a lot at the moment in the news. I think the last 12 months, we've definitely seen a lot of things around supply chain attacks. The SolarWinds attack, I forget how long ago that was now, but it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
Again, typical case of a supply chain attack. SolarWinds with a target because they are in every or most organizations in some way, shape, or form. So you compromise that bit of software, you've now got a foothold in all those other organizations. So that was definitely a big one. And there was also the recent one, and I can't pronounce the name, the
Kaseya,
Kazaya,
yeah.
I don't know what it is. That was another one again. It's not targeting the companies directly. It's targeting someone who's providing support services to them. And then once you've got that foothold, arguably, if you can get into those organisations from that third party, you've achieved your goal. So there's definitely been a lot of that recently in the news. If we go back in time, kind of significant ones where we've seen them play out, and we've seen them play start to finish. If we look back to the old Target hack back in, was it 2013? That was the kind of stereotypical view of a supply chain attack. What happened there was their HVAC, their heating, ventilations, and air conditioning. That was it. Controls company were breached. But they had direct links into the target organization because they maintained their equipment.
Yeah.
So therefore, they had direct links into their systems. Now, We'll explain later why this is bad or why things could be a bit better controlled. But what happened was the HVAC supplier got compromised. That allowed the attacker to go straight into the target environment and then install malware onto their EPOS systems. So, arguably that raises the question: why can the HVAC supplier contact the EPOS systems? That's another question and answer. So, again, they've been going on for a while. Supply chain attacks aren't anything new, but it's really where companies have that reliance on a third party to provide some sort of service or support. It's the security of that third party or service that arguably breaks the camel's back and puts the main organisation at risk.
Absolutely. I mean, you can see why you would go for the smaller fish as it is,
Exactly.
if you are going for your big targets. Now, you mentioned with the SolarWinds. Now, I know that's a software supply chain attack. Are there any other types of supply chain attacks that you know of?
Yeah, I mean, a supply chain attack is not just related to kind of software. It can be any attack, physical, software, where an attacker is targeting a main organization via their supply chain. An example of this still in the IT world could be I've heard instances of laptop suppliers being targeted. So I'm giving someone hardware, and that hardware is being intercepted en route and being modified along the way, so that the attackers are modifying it to provide whatever capability they desire out of the hardware. It's then being then sent on to its intended destination, and they are using those bits of equipment um, unwittingly knowing that they've been actually compromised or breached in some way. So again, it's not just a case of we've breached a piece of software. It could be hardware. I mean, even in the real
Yeah.
world, I know IBM have done some studies around the COVID-19 vaccine supply chain, and we found
Mhm.
some things where intellectual property is being targeted via the supply chain of the. I think it's to do with the cold storage mechanisms being used. It's
Yeah.
that they're being targeted. So again, certain people are trying to obtain intellectual property on the vaccines by targeting the actual supply chain of how those vaccines are kept, rather than directly attacking the people who are, say, making the vaccines or doing the research on those vaccines. So yeah, it's not just related to software, although it does tend to be the common vector that people are going for.
Definitely. So you mentioned there about someone intercepting and sort of messing around with the hardware. That's that's very sneaky. That's very hard to sort of detect. Which kind of moves on to my next question, which is, with it being a case of your vulnerabilities coming from your interconnected partners and suppliers, who are supposed to be trusted. Um, what can be done to help mitigate supply chain attacks?
Yeah, it's a very tricky one, because as the intended target of the attack, I'm reliant on all these external organizations for their services. I don't control those organizations, so I don't control the IT policy within my third party, my HVAC supply. So how I can't go and mandate things, or maybe I can as
Yeah.
part of my contract, right? So that is one thing. In my contract to do business with them, I can mandate you must have anti-malware on your systems. That I believe was the downfall of the Tygon. The guys didn't have an active real-time anti-malware system on their HVAC system. If they did, then I'm not saying it wouldn't have happened, but this particular vector might have been stopped. So there are ways to do it contractually, and I guess there are financial SLAs. I'm not a commercial guy in that respect. That you say we won't do business with you unless you do these things. So there is that kind of that people, process, and technology. I mean, the people,
Yeah.
the process side. There is an element there. It isn't just down to technology. If we're talking technology, there are things we can do, and there's maybe a few approaches here. There's your typical general security good practices. So as a security person, it's all well and good me sitting here kind of saying you should be patching your systems, you should be
Yeah.
doing these things, because we know we should be doing that, but we also know that isn't always possible. In the likes of industrial control systems, medical environments, you can't always patch a system. There isn't always a patch available. So there might be times where there is a weakness that you cannot do anything about directly. So arguably controls around how do people access the data? How do they get access to your systems? That is what we're kind of really talking about here now. So it kind of leads us on, and I use the word kind of zero
Mhm.
trust. So we talk about zero trust technology and zero trust frameworks. And zero trust to me is more an operate. It's not just a piece of technology you put in. It is a framework. It is a way of working, a way of doing things. And it's all about that never trust and always verify. So just because I am somewhere doesn't necessarily mean I'm allowed to do everything.
Okay.
So in the instance of, again, coming back to the target attack, just because I'm the HVAC supplier and I'm allowed to come in and talk to my HVAC kit I've got sitting within target, doesn't mean I should then be allowed to go and talk to every other system within the
Yeah.
environment. And as crazy as that sounds, most networks that you see are what we would call a flat network, right? Most people don't segment highly. They don't restrict inside the network.
Okay.
And it goes back to this old concept of perimeters. So back in the day, you'd fortify the perimeter. You'd have your firewalls and you'd have all your controls in. Once you were inside that perimeter, it's kind of fair game. Most things were open because it was deemed that, hey, if you got in, you're allowed to be in here. So you're allowed to do whatever.
Yeah.
Over the years, you'll often hear the sensationalist headlines. The perimeter is dead. The perimeter is gone. Well, it's not dead. It still exists, but it's a bit more fluid now. There's a few more holes in it, shall we say,
Yeah.
that people can pass in and out. And the really good example of this is, the last 18 months or so with the pandemic and the rise of home working, mobile working. Where is the perimeter now? I mean, IBM, we were running something like 95% people working from home. There is no IBM big wall around our systems, and then we go into an office and it doesn't exist anymore. So it's having the controls and the new ways of working in that kind of world. And maybe some companies are a bit slow to react to that. Some companies that have been very anti-remote and home working are now forced to.
Hmm.
And it's that thing in IT where if you're forced to do something quickly, security takes the backbone and you forget to do those things.
Yeah.
Security tends to be a blocker in those environments. And what do? Well, you just open things up and worry about it later. And
Yeah.
there's a risk there. And if someone's done the risk assessment, absolutely fine, and the business takes the risk, fine, but there is a risk there. So zero trust is the term we use now. I mean, it's a term largely coined by Forrester over the last few years. A lot of organizations now, we all have our own zero trust, policies and standpoints and points of view there. And it really is saying just because I'm allowed in somewhere doesn't mean I can do everything. And the analogy I like to use, it's almost like an office building or a building somewhere. I swipe my card through the front door, I'm in the building. Does that mean I'm now allowed in every single room to do everything? No. I still need to go to rooms and I might have to swipe into that room. If I'm not allowed in that room, it's going to say, you're not allowed to do this. So therefore, I'm not going to let you in. And it's the same on a network. If I'm logged into a network, great, I'm on the network. If I go and knock on the door of the HR server or the finance server, am I actually allowed to do that? Should I be allowed to do that? There should be systems in place that say, Chris, you're not actually allowed to do that, so we're not going to let you do it. And it's just always verify, never trust. Just because I'm inside, don't have implicit trust in me. I could not be me. I could be someone who's got my credentials. I could be someone who's hijacked my machine. I am not actually me. I'm someone else. I'm a naughty attacker doing something over there. So therefore, don't implicitly trust me on that. Put extra things in the way that will challenge me to say, are you Chris? So multi-factor authentication is the big one, right? Most people should be using this now in some way, shape or form. Again, going back to the target hack, if there was multi-factor authentication in there, I'm not saying it wouldn't have happened, but the username and password that was compromised, if there was MFA involved, would that still have happened? Well, unless they're compromising the MFA systems as well, and then it's a bit of a rabbit hole. So zero trust is the concept and approach people really should be looking at and thinking at with this sort of thing, because it's just trying to avoid, just because someone's in the front door or has a route into the organization, doesn't mean they can do absolutely everything once they're in there.
Absolutely. No, I think that's a great idea and a great sort of mantra, really. Um, Looking at sort of some of the tools that they can put in place, I know Celerity, we offer a managed SIEM service. Is something like that going to help organizations be able to, spot abnormal user behavior and sort of, raise some alerts for people if there's someone doing something they shouldn't, like I said, knocking on certain servers that they shouldn't be?
Yeah, certainly. So I'm a SIEM guy at heart. So yeah, I always hold a kind of a passion. So SIEM is great at the detection and alerting you when something's happening. So it's not the prevention tool. So ultimately, we want the mantra of the
Yeah.
prevent, detect, and respond. So we want to stop it happening.
Yeah.
Prevention is better than cure. Right? We want to stop it happening at the start. Now, again, when you look back, I can't remember how many years now, there were sensations headlines. Prevention is dead. You can't prevent anymore. To a degree, you're right. If someone is determined enough, they're going to get in. There's going to be a way they're going to get in. So how do you spot that? How do you see the abnormal? How do you see the things that people are doing? And the SIEM is the tool that, by and large, is going to give you that capability. You're going to feed the data in, be it raw
Mhm.
logs, network activity. It's going to do its analytics, and it's either going to give you deterministic alert. So you've specifically told me to look for XYZ. I've seen XYZ, so therefore I'm going to alert you. That's kind of your more accurate rules. Or the behavioral type rules. Tell me when something is different. Now, that doesn't mean that something is wrong. It just means something is different, and you're probably going to have to investigate to see if that
Mm.
is something wrong. So, me logging in abnormal hours, yeah, that might be a problem. Or it might just be, I've got a
Yeah,
load of work on at the moment. I've got to work the evening because I haven't got enough time. I might want to look at that. And what I might do is go into my sim tool. Okay, what has Chris been doing out of hours? Oh, he's been logging into the finance server. No, well, Chris doesn't work in finance. Then I'd probably raise my incident and want to investigate that and see what's going on. But things like, from a deterministic point of view, is my third party supplier trying to contact systems that they have no right to contact, they have no reason to be contacting? That's a pretty
yeah,
straightforward one, right? And you can send an alert, and then you guys can, well, you can then either lead it on to kind of an orchestration and automation, a response piece to say, okay, then are you confident in the rules and those alerts? To say, actually, let's automatically start stopping their access. So let's stop them from doing these things automatically rather than waiting for a person to come in, triage it, and do that. And I always think you've got to be quite brave to do that automated blocking, because you've got to be really sure that you're confident that the data that you've got and the alerts that you've got are really sure, because you don't want to be switching systems off or blocking users if they're legitimate,
yeah.
right? So for some cases, you could do it automatic. Generally, you probably want to orchestrate the activity. So you want a user, an analyst, or someone in there to push the button to make the decision. Once they press the button, the activities are
Yeah.
automated. So the disabling or whatever, yeah, make that automated, because it saves them a job, right? You don't want to have to then log tickets or do other things if you're allowed to do that. But orchestrate it, don't automate it, maybe. But yeah, so seems definitely key in that, because they give you the visibility of
Hmm.
what is going on. They let you see what people are doing, what they're connecting to, what doors they're knocking on, what doors are saying no. Tell me give me a report of how many people have been denied on this particular system to go and let's say all that sort of thing, which is, I think, is often overlooked now in the world of sim. I think people are focusing on the next sexy things like machine learnings and things like that, which, yeah, they're all needed, right? Machine
Yeah.
learning is the behavior analysis side, but I think the old non-sexy stuff still is in there, and there's still a need for it, definitely.
Yeah, I think the non-sexy is definitely still the most important, especially if you're looking at sort of, patching and looking at your vulnerabilities. The mundane tasks are still really, really important to, keep them secure. I'm
Yeah.
just going to loop back to something you said a bit early on when we were talking about, examples of sort of headline grabbing attacks. So there's the Kaseya one, which I know was a supply chain attack. They actually dropped in the Revil ransomware. So,
Yeah.
ransomware seems to be mixed in a lot. Have you got any sort of advice for anyone, looking to mitigate ransomware attacks and how they can stop those?
Yeah, again, very difficult. I think if you're being targeted by some of these people, then I say good luck. It is going to be very difficult because these guys have immense resources behind them. Again, it's easy for me as a security professional to sit here and say, make sure your systems are patched. That is one of the key things, and is one of the big things they will look for. Okay, it probably won't stop a 0 day. Most of these attacks, as much as we like to think there was some massively complex way they got in 0 days, often it's not. Often it's there was a system that wasn't patched, and that's how they do it. So I get not every system can be patched. Not every system can be patched in a timely manner. Now, if systems can't be patched, then obviously look at the mitigated controls you can put in place. So the general security hygiene is probably the first thing, the patching. Looping back a little bit to the zero trust side of things. So again, how you manage your access to systems, identity and access. Have you got flat networks? You've got to try and think of it from, if you can't stop the ransomware, I guess the first thing is stopping the ransomware from executing. Then you're talking about your endpoint tooling, so your EDRs that are going to go in there, look for the activity on the endpoint and actually block it at source. Arguably, that's the second, the most preferred method is stop it getting in your organization to the first place. One big way
Yeah.
to do that, it's not a technology problem, it's an education thing. So make sure your workforce are educated on cyber. Goes back to, don't click links you're not sure of what they are. Don't open email attachments. If you get that email that
Mm.
says, hey, Chris, here's your bonus information, open this PDF file that's got. I know I'm probably not going to get that email, so I'm not going to open it. So, don't be hoodwinked into opening those things. If it does get into your organization, okay, the next layer, stop it from actually running on your systems. That's where your endpoint systems and your endpoint detections come into play. Let's say worst case, it's run on the system. Okay, crap. Two things there. Probably one, we want some sort of detection mechanism to tell us it's run. So again, this is where the SIM can start to come into play. Because even if it's running on one system, we can look at activity on the system to see if it is ransomware-like activity. So if there's lots and lots of file access on that system, there's a higher than normal proportion of file activity, so reads, writes on those files that we would not normally see on that machine. That's an indication that something could be happening. Or Is it starting to try and contact lots of different machines on the network to spread? Normally my laptop might talk to 10 different things in IBM. Am I talking to 100 different things now? That's an indication that something's changed. Now,
Okay.
again, it doesn't definitely mean something has changed. It just means or something's bad, sorry. It just means that something's different on my machine. We want to look at that. Why is it different? The big thing as well now is stop the spread. So, okay, my machine's got it. I'm going to try and infect everyone in here. Stop that. Try and stop me being able to connect to those machines. Why can I connect to every device in the network? I probably shouldn't be able to. Why can my credentials be used to log into every device in the network? And that is the big thing, right? If it's domain admin or admin credentials that get sniffed and get kind of stolen there, have the net, and this is really difficult to do, so I'm not saying there's an easy way to do it. Have controls in place that stop those credentials being used to spread the infection, basically. So trying to stop the spread. And obviously, once it's spread everywhere, then you're probably in the response and mitigation side. How do you do this? And I don't have answers to how you stop that once it's actually spread. And I'd say pay the ransom, but you can't. There's no guarantees you'll get your decryption key. And if you look at the US, are actually, I don't know if they've mandated it yet. It's now going to be illegal to pay the ransoms.
Yeah, I know. And like you said, how do you know you're going to get the decryption? You've essentially got, a criminal blackmailing you. Are you going to pay a blackmailing criminal who's out to get your money? Yeah.
I know. I mean, I think so far from some of the big ones where we've seen they have actually paid, I think they have been given keys, or the community have somehow generated the key and found them out and published them for free. But yeah, you just don't know. And the worrying thing about this ban on paying the ransoms is I know a lot of the cyber insurance policies now are saying, well, we can't cover you now because we effectively probably can't pay the ransom to get your data back. And
Okay.
one of the worries, I think, part of the mandate I was reading yesterday was they said, but there may be exceptions. If your business, if this ransomware is going to cause potential harm to human life, you can have an exception put through that says you can pay them. Well, isn't that just going to motivate the attackers now to say, hey, if we want to get paid, we've got to target the industries that are actually going to put human life at harm?
Absolutely.
And that kind of makes things worse.
Yeah.
I don't want that to happen. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's an interesting time at the moment. It's an interesting time.
Definitely. So I think brought up some really good points, some processes, the people, processes, and technology. Um, for any viewers who are watching who maybe aren't a huge multinational company, and they might not even have their own SOC, a security operations center, what advice would you give for them who are, trying to mitigate the risks of ransomware and supply chain attacks, but they, don't have an abundance of resource?
So probably one of the main things I would say is find a partner who does. So go and speak to many MSSPs out there, Celerity. Go and speak to a partner who has those skills, and they can assist you in whatever level you would need. There will be offerings and ways they can do it at whatever level. There is guidance from the likes of the NCSC in the UK, and then obviously globally. There's probably other cyber standards for nation states. So there are plenty of free resources out there in that respect, but find partner organisations who are experienced in doing this, because especially if you're under time constraints, if you're trying to do this in a hurry and you don't have the skills, we all know there's a big, constraint on cyber skills and resources at the moment. These things
Yeah.
cost money, they take time. One of the things we probably don't have at the moment, even if you had all the money in the world, is you don't have time to get people in, find the people, skill them up, do that.
Yeah.
Getting in these organizations, these partner organizations for security will really, really help things. And I also recommend you've got to work with them and not just give them the money and say off you go. You've got to work with them, because where these partnerships really succeed is where it's a hybrid, and the partner needs the context of your business. They need to know how your business runs. They need to know what is of interest to you. If you can't give them that, if you can't with them work on that, then these things, I won't say they fail, but they have less value. They have less effect on them. So it really is a partnership. And if you don't get that partnership right, then there may be a bit of inconsistency, because the partner might be doing one thing, you might have another focus. Really get that embedded from the start that it's a partnership. But certainly speak to the people that know what they're doing on this. This isn't easy, as I've probably thrown out lots of buzzwords and concepts and glossed over things immensely in the short time. But these are people that have the deep skills to do this, and they have individuals who are deeply skilled in each of these areas that we've spoken about. Identity and access management, seeing all those things. There will be individuals who are they live and breathe those particular technologies, and You in a smaller organization, you can't hire that. You generally will have a generalist. Even if you've got a security person, they're probably going to be the one guy who's the generalist, which is fine for most things. But if you're really needing that assistance, definitely lean on the people that have that swathe of resources in the background to help you out.
Absolutely. Just like you said, working with the partners, we at Celerity, we see ourselves as sort of an extension to our customers. And I think having that sort of partnership and working strong together is probably the only way you're going to move forward with, giving yourself the utmost security you can. Thanks for coming on the show, Chris. There's some excellent points and insight and advice around supply chain security there. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for on this episode. So join us next time for more security panels. And as always, if you need any help with cybersecurity, come speak to Celerity. Until then, stay safe, stay secure.